So thank you ever so much again for joining us on this fine Thursday morning. My name's Fiona Nutley. I'm one of the account directors here at Mobliciti, and I'm here to just quickly run through the agenda of this morning's briefing. So I'll kick things off by giving those that don't know us a little bit of an overview around who Mobliciti are. Then I'll hand over to our CTO, Andy Brown, to talk through some of the strategic challenges that our customers are facing as we lean into 2022. And then we'll hand over to Matt Atkinson, who heads up our mobile services team and discusses putting sustainability at the heart of mobility. And I'll tell you, saying that any earlier than 9 a.m. is a bit of a struggle, but then I'll quickly close at the end with any questions. So there is a Q&A panel, so please feel free to put your questions through throughout the briefing. Okay, so about Mobliciti, I think most of you will know us already, but for those that don't, Mobliciti was started 13 years ago. It was actually our birthday earlier this month. And the business was really built with mobile, cloud, and wireless in mind. Since then, we've significantly expanded into other areas, always with that being our foundation layer. And we do tend to work mostly within regulated sectors. We now work with over a third of the top 100 law firms, but essentially any organization that takes mobile, cloud and wireless seriously is someone that we'd love to work with. Our real focus is to make the adoption of mobile, cloud and wireless seamless, secure, and essentially help our customers bridge any skills gaps that they may be facing, which I'm hearing is quite a common theme right now, as lots of our customers digitally transform in this, in the same projects. So that's it from me. As I mentioned, any questions, please do put them in the Q&A, and I'll hand over to Andy Brown now. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Fiona, and yeah, morning everybody. So the idea of this slide is really just to set the scene a little bit, what we're kind of seeing at the top table in terms of the strategic IT challenges this year, and how that kind of leads into some of what Matt will be going through in more detail shortly. So I suppose the first thing is we've kind of seen across the board, there's been a lot of change in IT over the last sort of 2 years, thanks to the accelerated pandemic adoption of technology. And there's a definite appetite to get things done this year. We're seeing the amount of delivery and change continuing to be pretty rapid in the market. There's definitely, a lot of recruitment going on. There's challenges getting hold of the right resources at the right time, but also having the right skills in-house to deliver on some of this going forwards. Alongside that is actually the kind of the dark side of cloud and SaaS adoption. So one of the things that I think people are starting to wake up to who are quite a long way along their cloud adoption journey is the fact that you are now a consumer of a service, and that service will change over time, and that can create some different ways of working and a new approach to delivering IT strategy. Probably one that's particularly relevant for today is obviously the usage of mobile devices. So in the pandemic, when everybody was locked down, clearly things, people weren't roaming around like they used to, for example. People were potentially using Zoom and Teams a lot more than they were in the past. But that's on top of the ongoing churn of, shipping devices out, using them all the time. And indeed, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because there's a lot of pent up demand out there for moving around and going on holiday this year. Seems like everybody's booking a flight, so it should be interesting to see what happens with roaming this year. Obviously there's the return to the office itself, so actually how do you prepare the workspace to be better adapted to the new ways of working? So there are a number of things in that space, like reconfiguring of offices, changing the layout to allow for more dynamic meeting spaces, but also this shift to wireless first, because that's aligned to the users themselves have generally had quite a big shift in their expectations of IT. On the one hand, they've been delighted, I think in many cases, by the way IT has kept up with the pandemic and actually enabled business to continue. But there is now an ongoing shift of that rapid pace of adoption, that ability to really get things done is now kind of baked into the expectations as well. This is probably one for another day, but it does feel like what started out as a bit of a buzzword a couple of years ago has now kind of really hit the top table in terms of how are you going to adapt and go beyond your SaaS cloud strategy into the world of SaaS-y and the service edge. And then finally, probably most relevant for today, what we're hearing a lot at the top table is that Environmental, social and governance considerations are really kind of a key decision-making metric on all projects going forwards. It's important for all organizations to be considering their place in the world, if you like, in terms of this particular measure, if you like, of how success is done in a business. So I think it's probably at this point probably good to hand over to Matt, because we're going to go into quite a lot of detail about how potentially you can start to measure this and make a real difference. So Matt, please.
Thanks, Andy. Morning, everyone. Yeah, today's theme is really we normally look at things like cost management, we look at inventory, we look at how we can deploy different profiles on users to adapt to their behaviors. But today we're going to focus on sustainability, really from two points, from carbon and its impact, but also the other benefits that can come from being sustainable, because they're quite substantial. So I'm going to be looking at user behaviors, how they've changed within the corporate, and what the impact of those might be. I'm going to touch upon enterprise voice. This is really, really important. So go back a few years ago, organizations were using Cisco via Mitel, possibly on-prem, probably moved to the data center in most instances. But these are being replaced by cloud services and applications. And what we want to challenge is this idea of how far are we really away from that point now that you can use a data connection on cellular and run voice as an application. My view is that for many users, we're already at that point, and that's got massive implications on how you buy, invest in mobile services for the future. I'm going to touch upon this concept of why a one-size-fits-all policy for corporate mobility is no longer sustainable, why it often leads to excess spending, and is really efficient. If your people use their phones very differently, some using lots of data, lots of voice minutes, some barely using their phones, does it make sense to give everyone a brand new iPhone going forward, or should we have a different approach? Going to look at how new device and network strategies can really optimize your allocation of your IT resources, but drive through reduction in your carbon footprint, remove e-waste, and deliver a much better experience for end users. So again, looking at the way people use phones, finding technologies that align with that usage profile, rather than just taking a view that mobile is mobile, we give everyone the same. And then finally, I'll take you through our three-step process, what we're doing at Mobliciti to actually make a difference to our customers and to helping them reduce their carbon footprint. And at the same time, drive better experience for those users and save money. So we're going to start by looking at the way that businesses typically look at their usage profile on mobile. And we're going to look at some insights that go with that. So just in top level, some of those that if you kind of view would have seen these headlines. So what we tend to find is top 20% of all users consume 80% of all mobile data. So Pareto rule applies. The top 1% of those users are now regularly accounting for 20 or 30% of all of that data usage. So we have to think about that and think, well, why is it that 1% of our users, if I have 1,000 users, 10 are consuming 20, 30 or 40% of our data? And the answer lies probably because they're consuming vast amounts of video. And by asking a question, why are they consuming video? What's going on within their world that's making them drive that way is going to help us think about, are they outliers, people that are just different from everyone else in our business? Or are they front runners for the way that people are going to use mobile as we go forward, start returning to the workplace, as we start to look at 5G coming in? And we use tools like this, Zoom, we use Teams, we use video the whole time now in our collaboration within our meetings. Is that going to stop with mobile going forward, or are these users really a show of what's going to happen elsewhere? Home working, just by way of context, use about 100 to 200 gigs worth of data per month. The reason we mention this is that over COVID, we saw somewhere in the region of 5 to 10% of all users were relying on mobile on some shape or form during that period of time. And the consumption levels are vast. If you imagine that a typical corporation uses 1 to 2 gigs worth of data historically on mobile, and a home worker using video, using Teams, Zoom, etc., using 1 to 200 gig, if a fraction of that type of usage makes its way into the future mobile usage, then your old way of sharing data and managing your data every kind of 6-12 months to increase a little bit is going to go out the window. One Teams call, one Zoom's call using roughly 1 to 2 gig per hour. So put that in context, you use in 1 hour with video what you used an entire month previously on normal email, bit of web browsing, that type of thing. This is a really interesting play for today, though. The bottom 30-40% of your users probably using no data at all, or less than 5 meg of data a day, less than 100 meg per month. And we have to tackle why those users are doing that. And in many organizations, the real answer when we delve in is that a lot of users already have another phone. They already use that phone for a lot of their data consumption, and they've been given an additional mobile phone from the business without any question as to whether they really needed it. Now, the thing is, the phones are now way more expensive in the connectivity that you use within those services. And if we can redeploy that investment in different ways, we can become more carbon efficient, we can become more sustainable long term, and drive big savings for the business. We don't just need to look at mobile data, though. We need to look at voice and understand what's going on in a voice environment. 20 to 40% of corporate users, as we see it, and it goes as high as 60 or 70%, no longer make voice calls on their mobile phones. And that's really important because it means that they've already changed technologies. And if they've changed technologies, would they be willing to change technology on mobile? So, for instance, if they're using a Teams or a Zoom app or 8x8 or any other kind of cloud-hosted solution for voice, how far are we from just saying, well, let's use that application within their mobile, and then we can look at a data-only proposition, and that's got some really interesting connotations. So in short, corporate mobile usage profiles have really started to change, and they're polarizing, as we see it, between two extremes. Those that are using vast amounts of data that in days would consume a typical previous shared data pool, and then this huge group of people that really don't use their phones very much. And whilst that might change a little bit going forward as there's more return to work, we're not seeing the change that we would expect. We're seeing people that really have phones that they're not using. And there's the opportunity for today. So if we look at a simplistic view of corporate data, this is, if you're an organization, you were relatively in control of your mobile, you might be able to look at your data consumption. So we see here the grey shade area is our data consumption over the last 12 months. And if we look at the red bars, these are excess data. So there's maybe a bit of optimization in this particular estate. If we look at the number of connections we've got, this is an estate of roughly 3,600 connections. And if we look at the average data per month, you can see it trends roughly around 1 to 1.5 gig per user per month. So total, this organization might look and say, okay, we use 5 terabytes worth of data, and on average, we use 1.5 gig of data. And most organizations historically have taken this kind of view when it looks at procurement. They've said, how much do we use on average? How much do we need? And if they're on the ball, they might look for peaks. They might say, oh, well, you know, we do use 5 on average, but we peak at 6. We can't go and negotiate a contract that doesn't account for our peak. So a typical view might be this. But the problem with this view is it hides varied usage profiles. So if we delve a little deeper, what we can start to do is look at different categories of usage. So in this one, we've classified it into a range of categories from no usage at all right through to the very highest usage of 20 gig or more of data. So if we actually relook at this, what we find is 40% of the users within this estate used 0 or less than 100 megs worth of data. And you can see down here, there's 40%, 16 of them are active. So there's 24% of the users simply didn't use any data at all. Whereas if we look at the top end, then we have this really extreme view that these 3% of users, in this case, what was that, 70 odd users, accounted for 35% of all the mobile data consumption within an organization. So by looking at it at the next level, we can start to say, okay, well, do we think that every single one of these users fits a one-size-fits-all policy? All should share data, all should be on the same phone, all should get a phone regardless of usage? Or should we be asking the question, are there users in here that need different technology, are already using different devices for good reasons, and could we leverage that in some way? But then if we delve into the next level, what we can do is we can create a thing called heat mapping against our data. So this particular heat map takes the same 3,700 connections, but it maps data consumption per connection on this scale, and it looks at the number of minutes used down here. Every one of these dots represents a connection. So you can see that there's 3,700, but you can spot these individuals. These are the outliers. What are these users here using 100 gigs worth of data, or in this particular case, you've got someone that's using vast amounts of minutes and not much data. But what you do notice is there's this huge grouping down this bottom left-hand side of very low data, very low usage of minutes. Now, obviously, this is quite extreme because we're looking at every user. So if I zoom in and I just exclude those very high users of data, and I look at these what we call typical corporate users, which are using between 0 and 5 gig of data per month, what you can still see down here is that you have huge amounts of users, so many in fact that we can't differentiate between them, that are using these very, very low levels. So again, what we can do as an organization is drill to the next level. So I'm going to apologize for the colors, but it helps me as someone that's slightly colorblind to understand different profiles. But by looking at this level, what I can see here is if I map the data usage on this scale, with my voice usage on this scale, and in this case, look at the number of connections. So I've got my 3,700 connections here. I can see 825 of these users use no data and no voice minutes at all. So the question I would be asking here is, okay, why is that? Are these 825 people that left the business that had a connection that's still live, but that connection wasn't recycled or disconnected? Is it a process issue? Or is it a case that we've got a whole range of users that were issued devices and connections that for whatever reason don't use them? Could we cancel those? Could we shift to a BYOD model if those users have their own device? Could we use what we call a virtual SIM? So virtual SIM is a really interesting concept that we've been developing with some specialist organization, which allows you to port unused corporate mobile phone numbers or low use corporate mobile phone numbers into the cloud and point them to your enterprise voice, like your Teams sessions or your 8x8. So if you have a DDI that your user would use with enterprise voice, we can point their mobile number to that, and we can give an application that sits on the side to manage their SMS. There's some big implications of that we'll touch upon in a minute. If we look at the other end of this scale, though, we can see these users using 20 gig or more of data up here. Now, only in this case 17 users, but these users might account for 20, 30, 40% of the data. For those users, do we want them on the same shared corporate data plan as everyone else, or should we be thinking these high video users need to move to a different type of plan, an unlimited data plan? So by looking at different profiles within an estate, from those that use no minutes but use data, for those that use nothing, from those that use voice minutes but not much data, to these ones that are in this section here where they're kind of typical corporate legacy profile, between maybe a minute a day and 10 minutes a day of voice usage, and maybe a 1 to 2 gig of data. By looking at all of those different profiles, we can build different solutions, different technologies, and manage them under one umbrella to meet the specific needs. And the great thing about this kind of modeling is that we're only reflecting the behaviors that already exist. We're not telling people to change the way they work. We're reflecting that into the technology that we provide. And all of this has got an enormous impact on your carbon footprint and future sustainability. This chart here shows the carbon emissions, technically it's the equivalent carbon emissions, what we call CO2e, of every device. And what you'll see is, on the whole, an iPhone, and this is true of most smartphones, is about 80 to 100 kilos of carbon equivalent emissions. And the vast majority of that happens in the production process, about 80 kilos in production and approximately 10 kilos a year in terms of actual usage of those devices. So if we have that kind of number in our mind, 100 kilos roughly, if you're replacing 1,000, you've got 100,000 kilos of carbon emissions if you're replacing that estate. Now, if we go back to our map again here, what we can start to do is map carbon emissions. I've used a figure of 90 kilograms of carbon equivalent emissions here, and we map them against our user profiles. What we find is we've got 74 tons of carbon emissions here given to users that have a device that they don't use at all. If we look at these users in yellow, these are users that really don't make voice minutes anymore. They use maybe less than a minute a day, that type of thing, probably using other technologies predominantly. Again, could we use their existing device and layer voice as an application for the corporate world onto that device and save that device? If we can, in this particular instance, just removing those two categories, and I'm not saying you would be able to remove every one of these devices, but even if we achieved half of it, you could see here that they've got a 48% reduction in their carbon footprint by tackling the challenge of who is really using those devices, how are they using them. And that's got a massive impact as well. In this particular case, if we looked at an iPhone 12 refresh, roughly £565 device, if we were able to remove these devices down here and use different technology, get rid of the ones that weren't used, that's £1 million worth of IT investment saved over a 2-year period. I would hazard that £1 million worth of investment exceeds the entire cost of their network charges for that period. So it really is a case now that device is your primary thought point when it comes to putting a device and network strategy. Network comes second. If you get the device strategy right, that will flow into the network, because again, if you don't need all these devices here, then maybe you can significantly reduce your network spend as well. But in this particular opportunity, £1 million worth of potential savings target by addressing that, by understanding these usage profiles. So what are we doing as a business at Mobliciti to tackle this? Well, really, we have a simple 3-step process. And step one is the simplest of all. Stop and only buy what you need. If up to 60% of your users actually don't use their phones anymore, or really don't use them very much, then is it effective to keep investing in that corporate phone? Or should we now challenge and say, is bring your own device or corporate owned, personally enabled, a combination of models better? One of the things that our modeling does, it gives IT leaders really the ability to explain to their organization what's really going on. And we're not saying change user behavior. What we're doing is reflecting that user behavior into the technologies that are deployed. So the first thing we say is only buy what you need. And we do that by having this data-driven strategy, using things like these heat maps that we've discussed earlier on to help really identify the different profiles, help you to understand how technologies can be delivered to meet those different users' requirements, and also how new technologies like virtual SIM are coming in to really make BYOD an effective strategy. BYOD, one of the reasons that people don't like it is because at the moment it relies their corporate calls and their business calls coming on the same number quite often. Deploying enterprise voice as an application instead is amazing, because it allows you to turn that voice on or off, but keep your own personal voice calls coming in on your SIM. So step one is use data-driven approach to create an effective mobile network and device strategy, and one that means you only buy what you need. Step two, carbon offsetting. So if it's typically 80 to 100 kilos of carbon equivalent emissions from the production of every phone over a 3-year life cycle. What we've done at Mobliciti from the start of 2022, so what are we, 6 weeks in now, every single phone that we supply now comes fully offset over its life cycle. So we've taken a three-year lifetime for a mobile phone, and we're investing in a carbon offset program. So if you do need to invest in devices, you can do so knowing that you're carbon neutral on those devices. And we've done that by partnering with Eden Reforestation. The particular project that we're working on is reforesting mangrove forests in Madagascar. Mangrove forests not only have a massive impact on the environment, but they protect thousands of different species of animals and coastlines, and 90% of those in Madagascar have been removed. So we've chosen this particular project where we plant 5 new trees for every smartphone we supply. Although that over a 25-year average lifetime for a tree will massively offset the emissions, what we decided was that we want to offset the emissions in the 3-year life cycle of the actual phone, so that we could generally claim that all of our customers were carbon neutral on their phones that they get supplied through Mobliciti. And then finally, step 3, gift and transform lives. You may be aware already, we've created this, teamed up with Computer Aid and Dell to create our Solar Learning Labs project. Now, Solar Learning Labs project's really interesting. What it does, it takes shipping containers and converts them into solar-powered digital classrooms, and it puts them into the poorest regions of the world. We've chosen a program in South Africa, where what we're doing is encouraging our customers to gift old devices, which we then securely data wipe, and we give an accredited certificate back of that data wipe, so you can rest assured that your data is no longer on those devices before they're disposed of. And then every pound that comes from the sale of those phones goes straight into this program. We helped close off one of the first funds at the end of last year in a Mankosi region within South Africa, and we're currently fundraising towards our next lab. The amazing thing about these labs is that they close the digital divide, and the digital divide is really, really simple to explain. I'm 50. When I grew up at school, if I had a pad, a pen, or a pencil, and I could read and write, I could learn, and I could compete with anyone in the world to some extent. The problem that we have in today's society, really put simply, is that if you do not have access to the internet and you don't have access to digital skills and technology, you are now left out. You cannot join, you cannot catch up. So the Solar Digital Learning Lab program with Dell puts computer technology into the hearts of these communities. Typically, we support between 1,000 and 1,500 children per community, but really importantly, it comes with 3 years worth of full investment to train people within the community to be those digital skills providers. And each one of these solar labs, because of the way that they're built, they're solar powered, lasts for 25 years. So it really does change communities. So if that's something that you can help us with, please do speak to your account manager. We love that. We've already raised over 30,000 towards the program. We're hoping to raise 80,000 this year to get our first full lab commissioned in 2023, and it's a program that we see accelerating every single day. So please do join us on that program if you can. So let me summarize over a few minutes in terms of new ways of thinking and new challenges. So if 30 to 60% of your users don't really use their corporate phone, do they need one? And that's the question if you take one thing away from today to start asking. Is your current mobile strategy actually creating e-waste and unnecessary expenditure? Everyone's got to deploy their budgets efficiently as possible, but one-size-fits-all approaches, really, do they support modern working, or are they an old way of doing it that's just leading to these inefficiencies? Are there better technologies that your people would prefer? Can we help them to work more effectively? Everyone I'm speaking to at the moment has got an enterprise voice strategy program going on. They're looking at how they move from legacy on-prem or data center PBXs into cloud voice, such as Teams, Zoom, 8x8, RingCentral. There's lots of different solutions out there in the market, but everyone's having this conversation. The conversation I'm encouraging people to think about is mobility forms part of that as well. Every one of these services has an application that means you could deploy corporate voice as an app on a mobile, and that may remove the need for you to have a traditional mobile voice and data SIM. You could start to look at sharing data on a BYOD device, or you could look at providing a data-only connection and a personal voice SIM. There's lots of different connotations that you can have with this. A question I would like you to ask is what percentage of users already have their own device and use it most of the time? Most businesses I talk to simply don't know the answer to that. With video coming along and making up the majority of all of our desktop communications, how long is it before that works its way as a standard into mobile? And just to put that in context, we see a 20 to 100-fold increase in data consumption where users use video on their mobile. Old ways of procuring mobile cannot keep up with that pace of change. It's going to lead to massive overspending. So are these top 1 to 5% of data users in your business outliers? Are they people that shouldn't be doing what they're doing, or are they front runners for future data usage? A really interesting point to debate. My thoughts are that user profiles have already shifted. The genie is out the bottle when it comes to video. We're not going to stop video now, and I think it's going to work its way into mobile absolutely everywhere. And therefore, I think mobile device and network strategies need to now catch up rapidly. So when it comes to developing this sustainable strategy, what can we do? Well, let's recap. Step 1, we'll help you understand your user profiles, develop a strategy for network and device that's better aligned to existing behaviors of people. We're not asking people to change. What we're doing is reflecting those behaviors and real business needs and finding technologies, services, and support models that better suit those or users. That's not only going to significantly reduce your carbon footprint and release huge amounts of IT budget for reinvestment, but it's also going to deliver that much better experience for your users and ensure that you really allocate your IT budget and resources more effectively. Step 2, if you do need to make investments into devices going forward, when you work with Mobliciti, you'll make sure that you've carbon offset the impact of that. You'll be carbon neutral on those device investments from day one. And finally, we can take all of that unwanted e-waste, those phones that you know are sitting in cupboards, in drawers, those phones that you know that you should have done something about and data wipe but never got round to. We can take all of those off your hands, data wipe them securely, and if there's value in them, make sure that that goes into making a real difference in the world. So on that note, I'm going to hand back in a minute to Fiona. We have got one offer for you today. This is our sales pitch if you're interested in it, but it's really, really simple. If you'd like one of these data-driven reviews where we've done the heat mapping, help you understand the profile in your business and what the different options are, then we offer that free of charge to every one of our customers and prospects that are out there if you're interested. We do need access to your actual billing data, that's your raw billing data, because you can see this type of data analytics requires analysis at the very lowest level, so looking at all of your data usage there, but it is done under NDA and desensitized. We'll then provide a workshop where we feed back all the results that we found, that the profiling. You can keep those profile information following that review. And then finally, we'll give you recommendations and share insights into what other organizations have been doing. So if you would like that, reach out to Fiona and the team. They'd be more than happy to help. And on that note, I'm going to hand back to Fiona, who's going to summarize and run a Q&A if we have one. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for that, Matt and Andy. Very insightful as always. And I've done a few health checks with my customers, and yeah, the results are often quite surprising and insightful. So we do welcome running that for yourselves. I have had a couple of questions come through, so please don't be shy if there are any questions. Still got time to get them in. There is one that's come in here around. So Matt, if users have two devices, dual SIMs have been recognised as an option, but some providers don't always support that, and some handset makers don't actually offer that. So welcome your views on that if possible.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's a fair point that so from a network point of view, some of the providers are providing eSIM, others are not. eSIM is going to be coming, but there are different ways of accessing it. So at the moment, we see that in the consumer world, eSIM is more available in the corporate world, but there are ways of getting access to the technology. So eSIM is going to be important. Dual SIM, most of the phones that are going to be in the UK are likely to be eSIM variants going forward. But there are still, for instance, in the Far East, I think they use dual SIM within there. Dual SIM is much easier because the network then doesn't really play a part of it. If you can get two SIMs and put them in, then you've got much more flexibility. So I would say that as with all these things, they're going to evolve over time. You look at what's available today. Every iPhone, though, for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years has had eSIM within it now. So there are options. So come and talk to us. If you can't find that from your existing carrier, then we can certainly help you find different answers to that. It's not going to be absolutely everywhere to start with, but this is a strategy. As it evolves over time, you're going to be able to take advantage of those eSIM and dual SIM capabilities.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think carriers on the whole are probably not your best first port of call if you want to talk about this, because they've always been completely conflicted about dual SIM devices, because clearly, especially in the UK market, they want to control the connection directly linked to the phone that they're usually supplying as well. And the same's true to a certain extent with eSIM. I think they see it almost as an annoyance and a disruption to their standard business model, which has kind of been one phone, one number for a very, very long time. Doesn't mean that the options aren't there, and fair credit to Apple for actually trying to break down the barriers here. With the fact that, it's actually, as Matt said, it's already dormant in probably the majority of your estate. The ability to do eSIM over the air and provision a second number onto a device.
There's also, Andy, there's rumor at the moment, well, I think it's more than rumor, that Apple are going to go eSIM only in the future. And when that happens, I think the network's obviously got no choice at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And they could literally be this year, knowing Apple. It's been rumored for years, to be fair, isn't it? But I think they will force it. I mean, the Apple Watch is already an eSIM only device if you have a 4G capable one. So definitely one to keep an eye on.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Well, I hope that answered your question. We've had another one come in around an easy change to make based on the information today would be a revision to the replacement process. Interested to know if the MDM portal, or MDM portals, I guess is a more general term, can help easily identify and show usage so they can determine whether they should actually replace the device or offer an alternative solution.
I can take that one if you like. I think you are going to be limited in what your visibility is going to be over the MDM layer. So MDM layer is obviously the mobile device management layer, the ability to control a device that's enrolled. You're able to have a level of visibility over it. You're able to wipe it and do all the kind of secure actions that you would want to do. The actual data that comes back in terms of usage is reasonably limited, if I'm honest. You're going to be able to see if it's on or not, and you're going to be able to see kind of what applications they're using on it, which might give you a viewpoint of what, are they actively doing things over time with it. It's probably not the area where you would look for this kind of data of, how heavily are they using it. To be honest, this is probably where you do need to join up with Matt's thinking a bit more in terms of looking at the carrier data and the underlying consumption.
We actually mix those two things anyway. Most of the reviews, we actually take a feed from MDM and we cross-reference it with the carrier data, again, to give that extra layer of insight within there. But yeah, I agree with you, Andy. It's you don't tend to see usage consumption. You see last check-in and application level, but you're not seeing the type of data you need to get these profiles.
Yeah, but if there is a takeaway from this, I think I would agree that you do want to cross-reference what's with your carrier and what's in your MDM platform, because I can pretty much guarantee, unless you're on top of that, you'll have numbers active with your carrier that are totally unrelated or dormant compared to what you're seeing in your MDM of current active users. So it's definitely a useful source of information. I just don't think it's going to give you the full picture.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And that concludes the questions for today. So pleased to say we will give you a little bit of time back this morning, but thank you ever so much again for joining us this morning. And if you would like to have a data-driven review completed by Mobliciti, then we'd welcome a conversation. But have a great day and see you on the next one.